Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, where you transform how you communicate to create the life and relationships you truly want. I'm your host, Alejandra Siroka, and I help multicultural individuals, couples, and change makers move beyond surface level politeness and conflict avoidance to have authentic, value-based interactions that actually resolve issues and deepen connection. If you are tired of rehashing conversations in your head, walking on eggshells, or feeling misunderstood in your most important relationships, this podcast will give you a new way forward. And if you've been thinking about getting support with your communication, visit languagealchemy.com to find out which transformative communication program is most beneficial for you. First of all, I want to wish you a very happy new year. The beginning of the year is usually a time in which we consider what to look forward in the coming months, what to let go of, what to change, and what to keep. In previous years, I devoted December episodes to discussing what to let go of. I also dedicated January episodes to help you consider what to change in your communication. This episode is something I'm really excited about because we are going to explore how to maintain integrity, awareness, and care in our communication when the world around us seems to be careless, indifferent, or hopeless. And if you've been paying attention to what's happening globally, you've probably noticed that some of our leaders are breaking away from the very structures that we as a collective had set in place to maintain peace, civility, and the possibility of stable, thriving communities. You're probably also noticing people around you keeping conversations on the surface about trivial things because they're becoming immune to the pain and suffering of others. Or maybe you hear people talk about a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And it's so easy to look at this and think, why should I care about how I communicate? If the people in power are doing whatever they want, why shouldn't I? This is the question I want to address today, because your answer to this question will determine the quality of your relationships, your sense of peace, and your contribution to the world in 2026 and beyond. As we look at this question from the language alchemy perspective, if we say whatever we want without regard for others, we need to reflect deeply on how it's going to affect others and also our very own future. Or we need to think about how our relationships are going to develop as time goes by. And as you hear this, you may say, oh my goodness, Alejandra, this sounds so dramatic. But when you stay with me till the end of this episode, you will know whether this is dramatic or practical. So hear me out. The health of the world depends on the health of our families. And the health of our families depends on how healthy our communication is. Healthy communication gives us healthy relationships. Think about it this way. You can't control what's happening in the world at large. You can't single-handedly fix global conflicts or make leaders behave with integrity. But you can influence the atmosphere in your home. You can shape the quality of connection with your partner, your children, your parents, your friends, your colleagues. This is how you think globally and act locally through your communication. Let me share some examples that might resonate with you. Maybe you deeply value peace and mindfulness, but lately, family dinners have become battlegrounds. Someone makes an inflammatory political comment, followed by a sarcastic response from someone else, and then a third person tries to keep the peace by changing the subject altogether, which adds to the tension and a sense of disconnection. So in your internal dialogue, you may say to yourself, Everyone is being so reactive. I am just going to stay out of all this and check out these cute cat videos on social media. Or maybe you consider yourself as someone who values curiosity and open-mindedness. But when your teenage kid questions some of your long-held beliefs, you become dismissive and defensive. You interrupt, you raise your voice, and you even resort to "because I said so" arguments. You may justify your reactivity by saying to yourself something like, "I was never allowed to say these things to my parents. My kid is lucky he can confront me that way." And what about the curiosity and open-mindedness you say are so important to you? They are nowhere near you. Or perhaps you really care about dialogue and understanding. But when a colleague publicly criticized your approach in a meeting using language that feels dismissive of your cultural background, you say nothing out loud. And from that moment on, when you run into your colleague, you shut down and avoid them. What can you do in these situations? Well, if you react by avoiding, attacking, or shutting down, then you are using what I call the language of survival. And the language of survival is not based on our values. I spoke about the language of survival in previous episodes, but in a nutshell, the language of survival is communication driven by fear that leads us to attack, to flee from an interaction, or to freeze and shut down. And it is in these moments when, if you want to act locally, you need to be very certain of your relational values. It's your relational values that will help you communicate with clarity, confidence, and compassion, even when others are not. Yes, even when others are crossing your boundaries, calling you names, or are unable to have healthy disagreements. Integrity in communication means staying true to our values when others are being kind and loving, and when others are communicating with us in unhelpful ways, even hurtful ways. Think about the people in your life right now. Maybe there's someone in your life who sends you long accusatory text messages late at night. Maybe there's someone who brings up past mistakes whenever you have a disagreement. Or there's someone in your life who uses the silent treatment and has been ghosting you lately. Or perhaps there's someone who makes passive-aggressive comments in front of others, or dismisses your feelings or experiences. Or maybe there's someone in your life who yells and uses an intimidating tone. When you encounter these communication habits, you have a choice. You can match their energy. That is to say, you can meet unhealthy communication with more unhealthy communication. You can withdraw and build walls between you and the other person. Or you can stay rooted in your values. And how do you do it? Well, let's use the examples I gave you before. At the next family dinner, when your mother-in-law makes an inflammatory comment about immigrants, instead of quietly judging her and disappearing into your phone, you could say something like, "I hear that you feel strongly about this, and I see things differently. It would be lovely for all of us to enjoy dinner. And even though I have another perspective on this topic, I do want to know more about your experience. How about we talk about this when we're done eating?" If you say something like this, you are in integrity with your value of peace and mindfulness. You are aware of the tension, and you are inviting everyone to enjoy dinner. And by suggesting a different time to talk about it in a way that shows care about the other person's thoughts and feelings, you are more likely to bring forth peace for everyone at the dinner table. Or let's say that you are a parent of a teenager, and next time your kid questions your beliefs about career success, instead of getting defensive, you say something like, you know what? I'm realizing I'm getting triggered here. I do want to understand your perspective better, and I just need a moment to get grounded first. This honesty can transform the dynamic with your kid and keep your integrity intact. Now, what if you are the person who tends to shut down when you hear unskillful feedback from others? Well, after you feel resourced again, you can request a one-on-one conversation with your colleague and say something like, when you criticized my approach in the meeting, I felt dismissed. I want to understand your concerns, and I also need you to know that how we speak to each other matters to me. Do you have space to talk about both the content of your feedback and how we can communicate moving forward? Now, you may ask me, Alejandra, but what if the other person doesn't change? My response is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. You are not communicating in alignment with your values to try to change the other person. That's not the point. You communicate with integrity because of who you are and who you are committed to being. This is what I mean by thinking globally and acting locally through your communication. And it has an added benefit because when you show up authentically, aligned with your values, you experience these situations with much less drama and pain. In fact, you experience them as an opportunity to be in integrity with your values. And I can assure you, the more you do this, the more confidence, the more care, and the more contentment you will feel. This brings me to an important distinction. When you communicate in alignment with your values, you are being authentic. But when you communicate in alignment with your usual habits and inherited communication patterns, you are not being authentic. You are being repetitive and reactive. And if you're someone who tends to say, I'm just being honest here, or I'm just telling it like it is, when you lash out, shut down, or match someone's unhealthy communication, that is not authentic communication. That's just communication on autopilot. Communicating on autopilot doesn't require thinking, effort, intention, or awareness. And many of my students and coaching clients have said to me, but Alejandra, saying nothing, avoiding the other person, or entering a shouting match feels so natural to me. Wouldn't that be authentic communication? No, that is not authentic communication. I grant you, it does feel easy. So when it feels easy, we tend to use the word natural to describe it. But it isn't natural communication. You know what it is? It is familiar communication. And when all you do is respond with familiar communication, you tend to be repetitive and reactive. You tend to say something you had already said thousands of times in the past. You're not being in the present moment, and you're not being authentic. True authenticity requires presence, which means pausing, effort, willingness, and awareness. Authenticity means taking the space to check in with yourself and making the effort to ask yourself, what do I value in this relationship? And am I communicating in a way that reflects those values? If you find that the answer is no, then it requires letting your values guide your communication. Let me give you some examples. Maybe you value compassionate understanding. or direct communication, or you value listening or meaningful connection, or maybe you value mutual respect, emotional safety, vulnerability, peaceful and creative resolution. So if you value any of these things, how would it work in your communication? Let me illustrate this by sharing something from my own life. I value love, integrity, and bravery in my communication. And these aren't just nice words to me. They are living principles that I try to embody, whether I'm speaking with you in this podcast, with the closest people in my life, with my clients and students, or with the strangers I meet. I want these values to be evident in how I show up in my interactions, in my plans, in my projects, and in my behaviors. And just yesterday, I had a moment with my mom where I saw myself slipping into a reactive pattern. I could feel energy moving upward and the familiar urge to prove my point. And at that moment, because I've been naming these values every day, love, integrity, bravery, they were there in my awareness. As my mother was talking, I felt my commitment to love, to integrity, to bravery. And I was able to say to my mom, "Oh, I had not considered that perspective, Mom. I'm sure many people think like you do. And I do have a different perspective, and I'm sure many people think like I do too." And then my mom said, "Yes, and there are probably other perspectives too." And I said, "Yeah, and they're probably more nuanced and more complex." And then my mom said something like, "Oh, Alejandra, our world is so complex." And I finally said, "That's so true." We continued our conversation until it was time to say goodbye and tell each other that we loved each other. We didn't get into an argument. And when I hung up, I felt content because I had communicated with her with love, integrity, and bravery. And that's the power of being clear about your communication values. When I say that this is what I'm learning to do again and again and again, I use the word learn very consciously here because I will be learning how to communicate authentically until my last breath. As you start 2026, I want to invite you to consider the values you want to adhere to in your communication this year. And not values in general, but specifically your communication values. The principles that will guide how you speak, how you listen, how you disagree, how you express emotions, how you set boundaries, how you repair connection. Remember, it is your communication that will determine the quality of your relationships. So here's what I suggest. Choose 3 values you want to bring forth in your communication this year. Just 3, not 10, not 5, not a long list. 3 values that really resonate with who you want to be in relationships. Let me give you some possibilities to consider. Loving kindness, clarity and simplicity, compassionate understanding, respectful presence, friendliness and warmth, listening with generosity, playful lightness, steady calmness, humble openness, healthy boundaries, authenticity, meaningful connection, emotional safety. Or maybe there are other values that speak more deeply to you. Whatever they are, choose them intentionally. Then, and this is important, write these values on a Post-it note and place them somewhere where you see them often. For me, that's on my computer screen because I see it almost every day. Maybe for you, it's on your bathroom mirror or your car dashboard or the inside of your journal. Or another thing you can do is take a picture of the Post-it note and then add the photo to your phone background screen. A coaching client of mine did that, and it completely transformed his communication. The point here is to keep them visible, to keep these values alive in your awareness, so that when you are in the heat of a difficult conversation, or when someone communicates with you in an unhelpful way, or when you feel triggered or defensive, you can remember, what are my values? And how do I want to show up right now? And these 3 values will be there to support you. Before we close, I want to come back to where we started. The world feels unhinged right now. It can seem like integrity and civility are disappearing from public discourse. And it's tempting to think, why bother? Here's why you bother. Because at the end of your life, you will not remember the political arguments you won. You will remember the quality of connection you had with the people you loved. Because you, as well as the people you love, deserve your authenticity. Because the children watching you are learning how to be in the world from how you communicate. And because when you choose value-based communication in your home, in your friendships, in your workplace, you're not just improving your own life. You are modeling a different way of being. You are showing that it's possible to disagree without destroying the other, that it's possible to set boundaries without attacking other precious human beings, that it is possible to speak your truth without cruelty, and that it's possible to listen without losing yourself. All this is evolutionary activism. This is how we act locally and change the world, one conversation at a time. If you want to learn to communicate in alignment with your values, if you want to transform your most important relationships, if you want to have the support of a community as you develop these skills, then I invite you to apply for the 12-week Language Alchemy group coaching program that starts on January 20th. This is where we go deep into practices that support value-based communication. This is where you'll learn the specific tools and language patterns that help you stay grounded in your integrity even when others are reactive. And this is where you'll be part of a community of a maximum of 10 like-minded people who are committed to this work. Registration closes on January 17th, so if this is calling you, apply now at languagealchemy.com/group coaching. And now let's recap what you've heard in this episode. Today we talked about why your communication matters even when the world feels chaotic. The health of the world depends on the health of our families, and the health of our families depends on how healthy our communication is. Then we talked about how communicating with integrity means staying true to your values, not to change others, but because of who you are. When you communicate in alignment with your values, you are being authentic. But when you communicate in alignment with your habits, you are being reactive and repetitive. Finally, I gave you a practical step for 2026. And that is to choose 3 communication values you want to embody this year, write them on a Post-it note, and place them where you will see them as a daily reminder of how you want to show up in your relationships. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about how you communicate. Thank you for being someone who's willing to think globally and act locally through the quality of your presence and your words. Until next episode, And as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.